Good morning and welcome to Renovate. My name is Darin Smith and I am on the teaching team here at Renovate. And as always, it is a privilege to be able to speak to all of you this morning. Now, since whenever I fill in for Greg, I feel like I'm a substitute teacher, I'm going to act like one this morning. So even though we're learning a new verse coming up for the next couple of months, we also learned Isaiah 43:19. So as a substitute teacher, we're going to do a quick little review. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick someone to come up front and recite it for us. Put your hands down because just like a substitute teacher, I'm going to pick on the people that are trying to hide. And I tend to go to the people in the back. No, I'm not going to do that. That's cruel. But you should have seen the look on some of your faces. I mean, think about what that feeling was. Some of you were taken right back to school, having that PTSD where you're trying to hide. It's like, please don't pick me, please don't pick me. So the reason I went through this little exercise is because the title of this message is In the Face of Fear. Because worry, stress, doubt, anxiety, it's all a part of our everyday lives. And as humans, we are very prone to fear. The things that we're afraid of, that we worry about, could be the pandemic, it could be the state of the economy, our personal anxieties, or being picked to stand in front of everyone and recite something. So the question is, how should we, as followers of Jesus, respond to fear when it comes? Now, Paul gives us a very practical as well as comforting command that tells us how we ought to approach our fears. And the interesting thing, as I was doing some research on this, is according to Amazon, who keeps track of things that you download to your Kindle and you highlight, this passage is the most highlighted passage of all of their books, not just the Bible. And it is Philippians 4:6 and 7. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we thank you for your truth. We thank you for your love. We thank you for the truths that you reveal to us through our spirits. Lord, I just pray that the words that come out of my mouth are yours, that I don't get in the way, and that people's hearts are prepared to receive your message. Amen. Now, the Bible doesn't say anywhere that things are going to be perfect once you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior. It doesn't say anywhere not to expect adversity in your life. In fact, it actually guarantees we're going to face troubles. In John 16:13, Jesus said, "In this world you will have tribulations, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." So there is hope, but we are going to face some troubles. But even in the midst of dire situations, we have the ability to actually act in faith. How? Well, not by pretending that fear doesn't exist, or that it's not that big a deal, or that you're going to try to gather up all the courage that you have and face it head on. We can act in faith by acknowledging our fears and making them known to the Lord in prayer. Now, it's important that you don't misunderstand this. Nothing in this passage should prevent you from being cautious. For example, after service today, I shouldn't get in my car and pray, "Lord, get me home safely," and then blow through every stop sign and red light. That wouldn't be very prudent to do that. What it means is that there should be a distinct difference in the way that we, as followers of Jesus, handle fear than the rest of the world. The world panics. We pray. Be anxious for nothing. Is this really possible? To be anxious for nothing? Maybe you think it's real easy not to be anxious about the little things, like, is it going to snow tomorrow? So do I have to get up an extra half hour early to get to work on time? Or what am I having for dinner tonight? But you're anxious about some of the bigger things, like maybe at work, they're talking about budget cuts that might lead to layoffs. Or maybe a relationship that you're in with your significant other has hit a rough patch. Or maybe you have a loved one in the hospital. It's possible because we do have the resource of believing prayer. Now, in Mark 11:24, Jesus says, "Therefore, I say to you, whatever things you ask when you pray, believe that you will receive them and you will have them." Now, believing prayer. That's believing that what you are praying for, God will grant. Now, I don't have time to get into the rabbit trail of the whole name it and claim it philosophy that's based on this. For example, praying that you're going to win the lottery and then believing you're going to win the lottery is not necessarily going to produce that outcome. There's a whole piece of aligning with God's will that is missed in that scenario that, like I said, I just don't have time to get into. But just know that believing prayer is believing that God can do anything, that no problem is too big for him to handle. Now, the flip side of this is it means there's no problem that's too small for him to handle either. Too often, we think God is too busy with all the big things going on, that he doesn't have time for the little things that we have going on in our lives. But nothing could be really further from the truth, because everything should be taken to the Lord in prayer. He loves us, and he's concerned about the same things that concern us and that we're worried about. Nothing is too great or too small for his loving care. But in everything, by prayer and supplication. So, at different times, we make our specific requests known to God when we communicate with him, when we are praying. Now, making those requests known to God, that's what supplication means. It's to present your request. And this is just letting God know exactly what you're dealing with, exactly what you're anxious about. And when you give those specifics in prayer, it's actually a process of releasing that worry to him. Now, prayer, it's more than just an act. It's more than just putting your hands together, closing your eyes, and reciting words. It's an overall attitude that should permeate our entire lives. 1 Thessalonians 5:17 tells us to pray without ceasing. Now, this doesn't mean nonstop prayer. What this means is constantly or recurring. This keeps our minds, which is our thinking and our thoughts, in God's presence. It creates a mood. It's a mood that constantly reminds us that God is with us always as a constant companion. With thanksgiving. Now, in order to be thankful, you have to remember. God knows that fear starts to creep into our lives when we forget his sovereign power. That's why all throughout the Bible, you see God regularly instructing his people to remember. Why? Because he knows as humans, we easily forget. Take the children of Israel, for example. The book of Exodus tells us the story of how God used Moses to lead the chosen people out of bondage in Egypt and into the promised land. Now, to achieve this, God sent plagues to affect all of Egypt. He turned water into blood. He sent diseases, locusts, hail, many others, all the way up to killing the firstborn of every family. Now, during these plagues, all of Egypt was affected except for the Israelites. They were never affected. They're in the middle. They see all of this devastation happening around them. They were never affected. Now, once they were freed, God actually provided guidance for them visually on exactly where to go. During the day, there was a pillar of clouds that told them exactly which path to take. At night, there was a pillar of fire, so they knew exactly where to go. They even saw Moses part the Red Sea to help them escape from Pharaoh's army when he sent them to try to get them back. And then eventually, when they ran out of food, God miraculously provided food every day to meet their needs. Now, even after all of this, whenever something went sideways or something didn't go exactly as they expected, they would complain. They would go to Moses and say, "Let's go back. Things were much better back there." They forgot. They forgot about the slavery. They forgot about the oppression. And they forgot about what God did to deliver them from that. But worst of all, they didn't see what God was doing in that very moment for them. Because they forgot, they weren't seeing what was happening in the moment. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, that was different. Those have got to be the most ungrateful and blind people not to see what was going on. But are we really much different in our daily lives? Because it's real easy when things are going relatively well in our lives, it's real easy to be blind and not be able to see what God is actually doing currently. It's usually after something big happens in our lives, things go sideways, God delivers us from it, then we look back and we can say, oh yeah, I could see God's hand really was on that in order to get me to this point. But we miss it in the moment. Let me give you an example of what this is like. My wife, she has a 96 Toyota 4Runner. And this is her toy. It's her baby. I have my motorcycle. She has this 4Runner. And her idea of fun is to take this vehicle and go on off-road trails. And I will go along with her from time to time. Now, just this past summer, we were out doing some trails, and she actually asked me if I wanted to drive one of the trails. Now, this is a big deal because this is actually the first time she ever offered me. She asked me if I wanted to drive one of the trails. So, of course, I said yes, because it seems like, okay, yeah, I'll just drive it. Shouldn't be a big deal. So we swapped places. So we set off on this one trail that is an easy rated trail. And this particular trail actually started out just gravel, loose gravel. Probably nothing much worse than some of the rural areas around here with unpaved roads. You can go in a straight line, you can keep a pretty good pace, but if you hit a curve, you got to kind of slow down, or it'd be real easy, momentum will just slide you off. So that wasn't too bad. That was for about a mile or so into this trail, but it was the vibration on the wheel was pretty constant, and it was not that comfortable. And actually, at that point, I was thinking, you know what? I'm kind of over this. I don't really see the big deal of this. But I figured, all right, I'll finish the trail. This is only a 5-mile trail. I can finish this. Well, after about another half mile or so, we actually started gaining elevation going up the side of this mountain. And the gravel had started to turn into these rocks. And there were actually some big boulders that were there as well. And they were so big that there were certain points I would almost have to stop and decide, do I go straight over? Do I go to the left or go to the right? Because if you go straight over on some of them, you take it at the wrong angle, then you can damage the underside. If you hit it on the side, it can actually push you off of the trail. And at this point, there was actually a sheer drop-off of about 100, 125 feet. So had to be very careful. Now, at this point in the trail, that's when I started thinking to myself, well, you know what? That gravel I was on a little bit earlier, that was pretty nice. So we ended up getting down the trail, no problem. So we got down safely. But that's what the Thanksgiving actually is like, is being able to see the good work of God in all aspects of our lives all the time. Not only when the worst things happen, but recognize it's actually happening right now, even though it seems like things may not be all that great. So you're praying about everything, and you're presenting your requests to God, and you have thanksgiving because you remember all the good stuff God has done in the past. So now, what's the result? The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. The peace of God. This is that deep sense of tranquility and calm that just works its way all through your soul. It affects how we feel. It affects how we think and how we see and experience the world around us. But this is only possible when we lean into God. Because when we do that, we get the peace that surpasses all understanding. Now, this is actually impossible for non-believers to comprehend or understand. And even as followers of Christ, it's hard for us to understand this wonderful mystery at times and how we can find peace in the midst of whatever is going on. So then this peace, which we don't understand, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Through the power of Jesus, our hearts and minds. This is talking about our soul. That's the way we think, the way we feel. They're going to be guarded. They're going to be protected. Now, this passage became very real to me in 2015. Now, most of us have that one year you'd like to forget. For many of us, it was last year, 2020. 2015 was my year. In 2015, I was separated from my wife. We were working on reconciliation, but it looked like we were headed for divorce. My mom, who had been in remission from cancer for 2 years, started getting sick again. And I was informed that as a part of mass layoffs at work, my role was being eliminated. Needless to say, I had a lot to be anxious about at that time. Now, as I was going through all that stuff, I meditated on these verses. In my prayer time, I told God exactly what I was feeling. I told him specifically what my worries were. And then I actually had peace in my soul that I couldn't explain. Even now, I can't even explain it. Now, even though I still ended up getting a divorce, I knew in my spirit that God had something else planned for me. My mom, ultimately, she did die from cancer. And even though I miss her very much, I still have peace in my soul because I have hope in God's promise that I will be reunited with her again in heaven. And I was laid off from my job, but I had peace and I wasn't worried about my finances because in my spirit, I knew that God had something better for me. Was I devastated that my marriage ended? Yes. Was I deeply saddened by the passing of my mom? Oh, yeah. Was I disappointed that I lost my job? Of course. But through it all, I never forgot what God had done for me in the past. And that allowed me to see what he was doing for me in the present. Now, I had the support of some really great friends through all of that. Jesus really used them mightily in my life. That's why connection is so very important. And this helped to guard my heart, my thoughts, my mind, the way I thought. And I can even remember at the time thinking, when I'm going through all this stuff, I'm like, man, all this stuff is just happening to me at once. I should be in a deep depression. I should be freaking out, or I should just be mad at the world. I just remember thinking I should feel all kinds of different ways except for calm right now. I was actually confused why I was so calm. But that was through God's grace. And that only happened because I gave it all to God. So, what are we actually doing when we're praying in the face of fear? I'll tell you what we're not doing. We're not pretending that the cause of that fear isn't real or that we shouldn't be concerned. Because ignoring an issue or something that you're afraid of or worrying about doesn't make it go away. Downplaying them doesn't work. What we're actually doing is we're letting go of our grasp on those fears. We're letting go of what we think we can control, and we're asking God to take control of them. We're acknowledging that we are not the ones that can do anything with the things that cause us fear in our lives. He is. We're recognizing that he is the one that is sovereign, even with the things that we fear most. We're asking Jesus to take our heavy burden upon himself and replace it with his easy yoke. Jesus said in Matthew 11:29 and 30, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." So a yoke. I've read this many, many times in the past. I've heard it before, but I don't have a farming background. So I actually had to look up, what is a yoke? For those of you in the same boat as me, this is what a yoke is. It's basically just a centerpiece that connects to a harness that connects two or more animals together. And then you hook that up to a cart or a plow or something else that can be pulled along. So in the Bible, when it talks about being yoked to something, it means being in submission to whatever you are attached to. So to be yoked to Jesus is to serve and obey him. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, I don't know if I'm yoked to Jesus, but I'm not really yoked to anything right now. Don't be deceived. You're yoked to something. It could be your career, it could be a relationship, or it could be an addiction. It's whatever is in control of your life. Now, Jesus wants to free us from that heavy and uncomfortable yoke of oppression, and he encourages us to take up his easy yoke instead. Now, what makes his yoke easy and his burden light? Well, let's take these two oxen, for example. Even though in this picture they're both the same size, let's pretend one of them is smaller than the other. So they're connected to this yoke, and let's say normally they pull this heavy cart that a farmer uses every day to take his goods from his farm a couple miles down the road to the market. So let's say the bigger ox, he's older and he's more seasoned. He knows the route, he's done it many times. He knows when to speed up, when to slow down. He knows how to avoid the ruts in the road and things like that. The second ox would be smaller, but he's growing and he's got a lot of potential. And he's going to learn from the older ox. By sharing the yoke, the elder is training the young one. And now the young one will learn that route. The young one will know how to avoid all those ruts and the other obstacles. But one of the big things is the older, bigger, and more experienced ox will actually have a bigger draw. That means they're going to pull harder. That means they're going to carry the majority of the load. So the younger one and the smaller one, while he's learning, doesn't have as much of a load that he has to carry. When we take the yoke of Jesus, he is the older and experienced one that can teach us. He's the one that's going to take the majority of that heavy load. He's the one that's going to take on the majority of that burden, whether it be fear or anything else. The world longs for peace from its fears. But most people look for peace in all the wrong places. It could be their jobs, it could be money, other people's opinions, or the illusion of control that comes from having knowledge or information. Now, all of these things will ultimately betray us because they're fleeting, they're finite, they're fallible, they don't last. True peace cannot come from anywhere but God. He alone is able to give peace in the midst of fear. So, back to the original question. How do we, as followers of Jesus, respond to the worry, stress, doubt that occurs in our lives? With prayer and thanksgiving. Then, through Jesus, our feelings and our thoughts will be guarded. In that prayer time, lay out specifically before the Lord what you're worried about. Then, ask him to take that fear and turn it into the peace that only he can give. Then, experience the serenity in your life that you can't understand or explain. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we thank you that you are concerned with the little things in our life. We thank you that you can handle the big things in our life. Lord, I just ask that for everyone who is hearing this message, Lord, you just show them that it's okay to present these things to you, to share with you the things that bother them. And Lord, I just pray in miraculous ways, you just show people your true nature. You show them how much you care. Lord, I want to specifically pray for the people who are yoked to an addiction. The people who right now, when I said, what is controlling your life? It popped right in their head. Lord Jesus, I pray as people pray and they give you that addiction and they hand it off to you and they want to share your yoke. Lord, I pray that you show up and you show them with your love how you're going to take that burden and you're going to show them how much easier and lighter your yoke is. Lord, I just thank you that we matter to you. We ask these things in your mighty name. Amen.